They announced my removal from the will over Thanksgiving dinner, between the turkey and the pie, like it was just another item on the table. I remember the sound first, the clink of my daughter-in-law's fork against her plate, the low hum of football from the living room, and then my son's voice, too calm, too rehearsed. "Mom, we've made some decisions. We think it's best if the estate planning reflects reality." Reality. That was the word he used. I was 62 years old, sitting at a table I had refinished with my own hands 20 years earlier, in a house I had helped him buy after his first divorce nearly ruined him. And in that moment, I understood something irreversible had already happened. They thought I would cry, or protest, or plead. I didn't do any of those things. I smiled, I passed the gravy, and inside, something old and patient woke up. Let me back up. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. For most of my life, I was the dependable one, the wife who stayed when her husband drank too much and worked too little, the mother who covered tuition gaps, emergency car repairs, quiet debts no one else wanted to talk about, the grandmother who showed up with cookies, checks, and unconditional forgiveness. I believed, truly believed, that love earned loyalty. I was wrong. 2 years earlier, after my husband Harold died, I sold our lake property and invested the proceeds into my son Daniel's construction company. He had just married Claire, a woman 10 years younger than him, with immaculate nails and a way of speaking that made everything sound like a performance review. "It's temporary," Daniel told me, "just until the contracts stabilize." I transferred the money the next morning. From that moment on, things changed in ways I pretended not to notice. Fewer calls, shorter visits, questions about my memory, casual comments about downsizing. Claire once suggested, smiling sweetly, that I might feel safer in a managed community. Safer from what my own life. The real shift came when my granddaughter Lily stopped staying overnight. "She needs structure," Claire said. But Lily had started whispering things to me. Little things. Things children say when they don't understand the weight of words yet. "Daddy says you don't need all that money anymore. Mommy says Grandma's house is too big for just one person. They said lawyers are coming after Christmas." Lawyers? So I did what I've always done. I listened, I observed, and quietly, I prepared. The Thanksgiving announcement wasn't impulsive. It was planned. I could hear it in the phrasing, see it in the way Claire avoided my eyes while Daniel spoke. They had amended the will, not removed me entirely, of course. That would look cruel. Instead, they'd reduced my share to a lifetime stipend managed by Daniel. My assets would be protected, my decisions assisted. Control dressed up as care. When Daniel finished speaking, he reached for my hand. "We just want what's best for everyone. Everyone but me." I looked around the table, at the family photos on the wall, at the place settings I had arranged that morning, at the woman I had once been believing this was the reward for decades of sacrifice. Then I said, "I understand." Claire exhaled in relief. That was the moment they made their fatal mistake. Because I did understand. I understood that they thought I was too old to fight back, too sentimental to burn bridges, too afraid to be alone. They didn't know about the documents I'd already copied. The separate account Harold and I had opened years ago, untouched. The conversation I'd had with my attorney 3 weeks earlier, just to update things. And they certainly didn't know that betrayal has a sound. It sounds like silence at a Thanksgiving table, and it echoes. As dessert was served, Daniel raised a glass. "To family," he said. I raised mine too. And in my mind, I began writing a different ending. Because if they wanted to rewrite my legacy, without my consent, I would teach them something they had forgotten. I built this family, and I knew exactly how to dismantle the lie holding it together. The first move was already in motion. They just didn't see it yet. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up before sunrise. Not from grief, but from clarity. That surprised me. I expected anger, maybe panic. Instead, my thoughts were sharp, orderly, almost calm. Betrayal, I've learned, doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it settles in, like frost, quiet, and deadly, killing what you thought was still alive. I made coffee the way Harold used to like it, strong and bitter, and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook. I didn't write feelings. I wrote facts, dates, amounts, conversations. I could remember, word for word, the loan I gave Daniel. The second transfer, Claire insisted, was just paperwork. The email from their lawyer requesting copies of my identification. The moment Daniel asked if I'd considered naming him medical proxy. Patterns reveal themselves when you stop excusing them. By 9 o'clock, I had filled 12 pages. At 10, I made my first call. Margaret Levinson, a state attorney voice, like steel wrapped in velvet. "I think my family is trying to sideline me," I said. She paused only briefly. How aggressively. I told her everything. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. "They've already overplayed their hand," she said. "But you'll need patience." Patience I had. I'd practiced it my whole life. The next call was to the bank. I requested full statements and authorization logs. There was a hesitation when I asked about recent activity tied to my Social Security number. Mrs. Whitmore, the representative, said carefully, "There was a co-signature on a business loan approved earlier this year." I felt my fingers tighten around the receiver. "I did not co-sign any loan." Silence. "Then I suggest you come in." That afternoon, I drove to the branch, my hands steady on the wheel. The documents they showed me confirmed what my instincts already knew. My signature had been forged. Not clumsily, not obviously, but wrong. A little too round, a little too rushed. Daniel's desperation had made him careless. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I requested copies. I thanked the manager. I smiled, like a woman who didn't yet know her life had been tampered with. That night, Lily called. "Grandma," she whispered. "Mom and Dad were fighting. About me, I wanted to ask." Instead, I said, "Are you okay?" "They said something about a judge," she said, "and that you wouldn't make things difficult if you loved us." The sentence hit me harder than any legal document. Children hear the truth stripped of euphemism. After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room and let myself feel it. Not just the betrayal, but the insult. They weren't just trying to take my assets. They were trying to erase my authority, to reframe my strength as confusion, to turn my love into leverage. That was the emotional wound, and wounds demand response. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I asked Daniel for help with small things. I mentioned headaches. I laughed when Claire corrected my memory. Every performance gave them confidence. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, everything shifted. Margaret drafted a new trust, airtight and irrevocable. I transferred property titles. I restructured accounts. I documented the forgery and filed a quiet fraud notice. I didn't want revenge yet. I wanted leverage. The real test came at Christmas. They invited me, insisted, even saying how important togetherness was. I arrived with gifts and the expression of a woman grateful not to be forgotten. During dinner, Claire placed a folder beside my plate. "Just some end-of-year paperwork," she said softly, "so we can help you relax." I didn't open it. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him, at the man I'd raised, the boy who used to cry when he disappointed me. "Not tonight," I said. His jaw tightened. Just for a second. That was all I needed to see, because pressure always reveals intent. And they were running out of time. As I drove home that night, snow beginning to fall, I knew the next move would decide everything. They thought they were managing my decline. They didn't realize they were standing inside a trap I had spent decades learning how to build, and soon, very soon, I would close it. The first official notice arrived in January, thin white, envelope, no return address, slid halfway under my front door, like it didn't want to be seen. Inside was a formal request for a cognitive evaluation, not a suggestion, a request, signed by a medical group I had never contacted, referenced by an attorney I didn't recognize, and justified under the phrase I was beginning to despise, concern for my well-being. I sat at the kitchen table and laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was almost impressive. They were escalating. This wasn't about support anymore. This was about documentation, about creating a paper trail that said Eleanor Whitmore was confused, vulnerable, unfit. Once that narrative existed, everything else would slide into place like dominoes. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my notebook. Exhibit 17. That afternoon, Daniel came by unannounced. He didn't knock the way he used to. He knocked like a man entering a negotiation. "Mom," he said, scanning the room. "You got the letter?" I poured tea without answering. "You didn't have to do this," he continued. "We're just trying to help." I handed him a cup and watched his hand shake when he took it. "Help me how?" I asked. He sighed, rubbing his temple. "You're stressed. You forget things. Claire worries." Interesting how my stress always coincided with their financial pressure. "I remember everything important," I said. He avoided my eyes. "The evaluation is routine. After that, things will be easier." "Easier for whom?" I nodded slowly. "Fine." His shoulders dropped in relief. That was mistake number 2. Over the next week, I prepared. Not emotionally, logistically. Margaret arranged for my own independent evaluation. Private, thorough, and documented by a neurologist whose reputation carried weight in courtrooms. I passed with distinction. No impairment, no decline. Sharp cognitive function, consistent with age and education. The report was devastating. To them, I also requested copies of the medical authorization forms Daniel had submitted on my behalf. The signatures were mine. At least they were supposed to be. Forgery number 2. When I confronted Daniel not with anger, but with paperwork, his composure cracked. "I didn't think you'd notice," he said quietly. That was the truth, ugly and honest. "I didn't think you'd fight." I looked at my son and realized something painful. He wasn't cruel. He was weak, and weak people will justify anything if it means someone else carries the weight. By February, Claire stopped pretending. Her tone sharpened. Her smiles disappeared. She called daily, asking if I'd scheduled the evaluation yet, reminding me of deadlines, mentioning how judges don't like resistance. Judges. That was the word that finally burned away the last of my hesitation. They weren't planning to persuade me. They were preparing to override me, so I gave them what they wanted. Compliance. I agreed to the evaluation. Their doctor. Their timeline. I showed up early, dressed neatly, carrying my purse like a prop. The physician was polite, distant, already convinced. His questions were rehearsed, his pauses intentional. "Do you ever feel disoriented?" "Only when people lie to me," I said. He didn't smile. I answered everything carefully, deliberately missing just enough details to seem uncertain. I confused dates by a year, hesitated over names, mentioned stress, headaches. Not enough to fail, enough to blur. The report was inconclusive, which was exactly what Claire needed. She called that night triumphant. "This will help," she said. "Now we can move forward." Forward. The word echoed as I hung up and opened the folder Margaret had prepared. Because, while they were building doubt, I was building certainty. The forged signatures had been flagged. The trust documents were finalized. A temporary injunction was drafted, ready to file the moment they overstepped. All that was left was timing. They invited me to dinner the following Sunday. A family reset, Claire called it. I accepted, because you don't spring a trap from a distance. You wait until everyone is standing exactly where you need them. And I could feel it. The ground beneath them was already shifting. The Sunday dinner was staged like a performance meant to reassure. Candles, soft music, Claire's best dishes, Daniel hovering with forced attentiveness, refilling my glass before I could ask. Lily sat quietly, eyes flicking between the adults, sensing tension she didn't yet have language for. Halfway through the meal, Claire placed her hand over Daniel's. "We've talked," she said, smiling too brightly, "and we think it's time to formalize things." Daniel slid a folder across the table. Thick, heavy, final. Power of attorney, medical authority, financial management, everything. All standard, Claire said. Just signatures. I didn't touch it. Instead, I reached into my purse and placed my own folder beside it. Daniel frowned. "What's that?" "Clarity," I said. I opened my folder first. I laid out the neurologist's report, the notarized affidavit stating full cognitive capacity, the bank statement highlighting the forged loan. Claire's face drained of color. Daniel's mouth opened then closed. "You forged my name," I said calmly. "Twice." "That's not," Claire began. "It is," I interrupted. "And the bank agrees." Silence fell over the table. Lily's fork clinked against her plate. I continued. "As of last month, all my assets are held in a trust. Irrevocable. Beneficiary Lily." Daniel's chair scraped backward. "You can't do that," Claire said sharply. "She's a child." "Exactly," I replied. "Which means the court will protect it." Daniel looked at me like he didn't recognize me. "When were you going to tell us?" he asked. "When you stopped trying to erase me." Claire stood abruptly. "You're doing this to punish us." "No," I said. "I'm doing this to stop you." She laughed brittle and loud. "You think this is over?" I met her gaze. "I think you've already lost." Because that was the moment I slid the final document across the table. The injunction, filed that morning, freezing all attempts to modify my estate, challenge my capacity, or act on my behalf without court approval. Daniel sank back into his chair. Claire stared at the paper like it might bite her. "You planned this," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "While you were planning me." Lily looked up at me, eyes wide. "Grandma," she said softly, "are you mad?" I reached for her hand. "No, sweetheart. I'm awake." That night, they left without dessert. And as I cleared the table alone, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not victory, relief. Because the war had finally been named. And now that it was out in the open, I could finish it. On my terms. They didn't speak to me for 12 days after the injunction. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a passive-aggressive email disguised as concern. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was strategic. People like Claire don't retreat when they're cornered. They regroup. I used the time well. Margaret moved quickly, filing formal notice with the court and alerting Daniel's attorney that any further attempts to act on my behalf would be considered harassment. The bank froze the fraudulent loan pending investigation, quietly, efficiently. And then just when the pressure should have forced them to respond rationally, Claire did what she always did when she lost control. She went public. It started with a phone call from my church friend Marlene. "Eleanor," she said hesitantly, "I don't want to alarm you, but Claire posted something online. About you." I opened my laptop. There it was. A long, carefully worded post about the pain of watching a loved one decline and the difficult choices families must make when pride interferes with care. No names mentioned, no accusations stated outright. Just enough implication to poison the well. The comments were worse. "So brave of you. Elders can be so stubborn. You're doing the right thing." I felt my stomach twist, not from shame, but from fury. They weren't just trying to take my assets anymore. They were trying to rewrite my character. Within hours, Daniel's name appeared on the post. A heart emoji. Nothing else. That night, Lily called me crying. "Mom says you're sick," she whispered, "and that you're being mean." I closed my eyes and breathed through the ache. "What do you think?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "I think they're scared." "Smart girl," I realized then that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was a narrative war, and Claire had fired the first shot. The next morning, Margaret introduced me to someone new, Janice Rowell, crisis communications, reputation management, the kind of woman who didn't raise her voice because she never needed to. You don't defend yourself, Janice said, after reviewing everything. You let the truth arrive with documentation. By noon, we had assembled a package, court filings, medical evaluations, the injunction, proof of forgery. We didn't post it. We sent it, privately, to Claire's employer, her volunteer board, her church leadership, her closest allies, people who believed they knew her. And then we waited. The phone rang 2 days later. It was Daniel. He sounded exhausted. She's losing everything, he said. The board asked her to step down. Her job's investigating. They think she manipulated records. I said nothing. They're asking questions about the loan, he continued. About the doctor. About why she posted those things. Good, I said. There was a long pause. She says you did this on purpose. I smiled sadly. She did too, I replied. That night, Claire finally called me herself. Her voice was sharp, frantic, stripped of its polish. You ruined me. No, I said calmly. You exposed yourself. You turned everyone against me. No, you handed them evidence. She laughed bitterly. You think you're some kind of hero. I think I'm a grandmother who refused to disappear. She went quiet. Then she said something I hadn't expected. I was afraid, she whispered, of losing everything. So was I replied. The difference is, I didn't lie to do it. She hung up. By the end of the week, Daniel moved out. He took Lily and went to stay with his sister in Oregon. Claire filed for separation. The irony didn't escape me. She tried to remove me from the family to secure her future, and instead, she erased herself. But the war wasn't over, because Daniel still had to choose who he was, and the next move would force him to. Daniel came to see me on a rainy Thursday morning, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. He looked older than his 44 years, not tired, worn down. I didn't know how bad it would get, he said, standing in my doorway, like a child, unsure if he was welcome. I stepped aside. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where everything had begun. She says you manipulated me, he continued, that you planned this from the start. I poured coffee. I planned to protect myself, I said. What you did with that is on you. He rubbed his face. She says you're punishing us. I met his eyes. You punished yourself the moment you decided I was expendable. That landed. He swallowed. I forged the loan, he said. Not her. I already knew, but hearing it still hurt. I was drowning, he continued. The company was failing. She kept saying we needed leverage security, that you'd understand. And when I didn't, I asked. She said we'd make you. There it was, the truth finally unmasked. I failed you, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. But you also failed Lily. That broke him. His shoulders shook. His hands clenched. She keeps asking why Grandma won't come over, he whispered. I don't know what to tell her. I reached across the table. You tell her the truth, I said. That adults made mistakes, and that mistakes have consequences. He nodded slowly. What do you want from me? He asked. It was the first honest question he'd asked in years. I want accountability, I said. Not apologies, not excuses. He looked up. I want you to testify, I continued. About the forgery, the pressure, the plan. His face paled. That would destroy her. She chose that path, I said evenly. Not you. He hesitated. I'm her husband. You're my son, I replied. And Lily's father. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he nodded. I'll do it. The court date was set for March. Claire contested the trust, claiming undue influence and cognitive impairment. Her attorney argued I had been manipulated by fear that my actions were retaliatory and unstable. They underestimated one thing. Paper doesn't lie. The neurologist testified. The bank manager testified. Margaret testified. And then Daniel took the stand. His voice shook, but he didn't back down. He admitted everything. The forged signatures. The manipulation. the pressure. Claire watched from across the courtroom, her face rigid, her eyes cold. When it was over, the judge ruled swiftly. The trust stood. The injunction became permanent. Claire was ordered to cease all contact with my finances and medical affairs, and the forgery was referred for prosecution. Outside the courthouse, Daniel looked at me with something like fear. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "Good," I replied, "because this isn't about that." I bent down to Lily, who had been waiting quietly beside him. She hugged me hard. "I knew you weren't sick," she whispered. I kissed her hair, and I knew you were brave. As they walked away, I felt the final weight lift, not because I had won, but because I had chosen myself. And in doing so, I had shown my granddaughter how power really works. Quietly, legally, irreversibly. And there was still more to come. Winning in court didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing in the wreckage after a storm, staring at what was still upright and what had been permanently stripped away. The trust was secure. The injunction held. Claire's name was now a liability instead of a weapon. But none of that erased the quiet grief that settled in once the adrenaline faded. Daniel didn't call for weeks. Lily did. She asked about my garden, about whether the roses would bloom again this spring, about whether I still made the lemon cookies she liked. Children have a way of circling truth without stepping on it. I answered carefully, kindly, never about her parents. Then one afternoon in early April, an envelope arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize. Claire was countersuing, not over the trust. She'd lost that battle. This was different. She was accusing me of financial abuse, claiming I had manipulated Daniel for years, controlled him with money, and orchestrated the entire collapse of their marriage to isolate Lily. The accusation was absurd and dangerous. Margaret called me within the hour. "She's desperate," she said. "This is scorched earth, defamation, emotional damages, alienation. If it gained traction, it could taint everything. My credibility, the trust, even Lily's stability." For the first time since Thanksgiving, fear crept in. Not fear of losing money, fear of losing access. Claire knew that if she couldn't control me, she could try to poison Lily's perception of me instead. That night, Lily called again. "Mom says you don't love her," she whispered. My chest tightened. "What do you think I asked?" She paused. "I think grown-ups say things when they're hurting." God help me, she was wiser than all of us. But wisdom doesn't stop damage. Margaret was blunt. "If this goes to trial, Claire will drag everything out. She wants exhaustion, emotional fatigue. She wants you to back off." I stared out the window at the garden Harold and I had planted together. "I won't," I said. "Then you need to go on record," Margaret replied. "Fully, publicly." That was the escalation. Up until now, everything had been controlled, contained, legal. Going public meant exposure, scrutiny, judgment. It meant letting strangers dissect my life. I didn't want that. But Claire had forced my hand. I agreed to a deposition. 3 hours in a sterile conference room, answering questions about my marriage, my parenting, my finances, about why I helped Daniel, about whether I favored Lily. Claire's attorney tried to paint me as manipulative, overbearing, obsessed with control. I answered calmly. I spoke about sacrifice, about love, about boundaries. I spoke about being excluded from decisions, about forged signatures, about being quietly rewritten as incompetent. By the end, the attorney's questions softened. Facts have weight. 2 days later, Claire's suit collapsed. Withdrawn. No explanation. Margaret later confirmed what I suspected. Her attorney had reviewed the deposition transcripts and advised her to walk away. She didn't have a case. She had bitterness, but Claire wasn't finished. Because revenge doesn't always wear legal clothing. Sometimes it wears silence. The silence from Claire was immediate and absolute. No calls, no filings, no threats. Instead, there was something worse. Distance. Daniel stopped responding to my messages. Lily's calls became shorter, more guarded. When I asked about school, she answered politely, but without warmth. I recognized the pattern. This wasn't legal strategy. This was emotional quarantine. Claire couldn't touch my assets, so she was isolating my heart. Margaret warned me, "Be careful. Anything you say or do could be framed as interference." So I did the only thing left. I waited. Weeks passed. Easter came and went. Without an invitation, Lily sent a drawing through Daniel's sister. A crooked bunny with my name written in purple crayon. I pinned it to the fridge and pretended it didn't hurt. Then in late May, the call came. It wasn't Daniel. It was Lily's school counselor. "We're required to notify you," she said gently, "because your name came up during a session." My pulse quickened. Lily expressed concern that she's responsible for the conflict between adults. The counselor continued. "She believes if she hadn't talked to you, things wouldn't be broken." That was it. The final line. Claire hadn't just isolated me. She'd burdened a child with guilt. I contacted Margaret immediately. "I don't want to sue," I said. "I want intervention." Within 48 hours, a guardian ad litem was appointed to assess Lily's emotional welfare. Not because I demanded it, but because the counselor had documented distress. The court doesn't move fast, but it moves. Claire was furious. She left 3 voicemails in one night, swinging wildly between rage and tears. "You're stealing my daughter. You planned this. You don't know when to stop." She was wrong. I knew exactly when to stop. The evaluation process took 6 weeks. Interviews, observations, reports. I stayed silent throughout. No accusations, no explanations. I let professionals do what they were trained to do. The final report was clear. Lily was experiencing emotional manipulation. Adult conflict was being framed as her responsibility. Contact with me was recommended as stabilizing, not harmful. The court ordered structured visitation, not custody, connection. Daniel called me the night he read the report. "I didn't see it," he said, voice breaking. "I didn't want to. That's how it happens," I replied. Quietly, he paused. "She says you won." "I didn't," I said. "Lily did." The first supervised visit was awkward. Lily clung to me, unsure if it was allowed. I knelt in front of her. "You don't have to choose," I said softly. "You don't fix adults. We fix ourselves." She nodded slowly, tears spilling over. "I just want everyone to stop being mad." "So do I said. Claire watched from across the room, eyes hard. But something had changed. She wasn't in control anymore. The narrative was no longer hers. And for the first time, I saw doubt flicker across her face. Not fear of the law, fear of being seen. And I knew then that karma doesn't always strike loudly. Sometimes it simply removes the mask and leaves the truth standing impossible to ignore. The summer unraveled Claire in ways the courtroom never could. Without control of the narrative, without leverage over my finances, or Lily's access to me, she began to come undone publicly. Slowly at first, then all at once. Daniel told me later that it started with small things. Missed appointments, explosive arguments over nothing, Claire accusing him of siding with me simply because he refused to lie anymore. "She says you poisoned me," he said, during one of our rare, careful phone calls, "that you turned Lily against her." I closed my eyes. "Lily doesn't need help seeing the truth," I replied. "Children feel it before they understand it." By August, Claire's attorney withdrew from representation. Conflict of interest officially. Burnout unofficially. A week after that, Daniel called again, his voice barely steady. "She's taken money from the joint account," he said. "Almost all of it." I wasn't surprised. Control seekers panic when control slips, and panic makes them reckless. Then came the call that changed everything. It was the guardian ad litem, Mrs. Whitmore. She said professional, but firm. "We have concerns." Claire had missed 3 scheduled evaluations. She'd attempted to cancel Lily's therapy sessions. She'd told Lily that the court was being tricked by bad people. That was no longer bitterness. That was harm. The emergency hearing was separate. Was das but my name the time wise. I sat quietly in the courtroom, hands folded, spine straight, the picture of calm restraint. Claire arrived late, hair disheveled, eyes wild, whispering furiously to a new attorney who looked already defeated. When the judge spoke, his tone was measured but unmistakably stern. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, addressing Claire, "your conduct raises serious concerns regarding emotional safety." Claire laughed. Actually laughed. "She's the problem," she snapped, pointing at me. "She's been undermining me for years. She thinks she owns my daughter." The judge didn't flinch. "She owns nothing," he said, "but she has demonstrated stability. You have not." Daniel sat beside Claire, his face pale, his jaw clenched. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. The ruling was swift. Temporary primary custody to Daniel. Mandatory counseling for Claire. Court-ordered boundaries regarding Lily's exposure to adult conflict. Claire stood up abruptly. "You can't do this," she shouted. "She planned this. She planned everything." The judge raised his voice for the first time. "Ms. Whitmore, sit down." She didn't. Bailiff stepped forward. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Claire was escorted out of the courtroom, still shouting my name, like a curse. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt sorrow. Not for her, for the woman she had chosen to become. Outside, Daniel leaned against the courthouse wall, head in his hands. "I never thought it would go this far," he said. I stood beside him, not touching, not retreating. "It always does," I replied, "when lies stop working." Lily ran toward me, arms open, unrestrained, for the first time in months. I caught her, held her, felt her small body tremble as the world rearranged itself around her. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You're safe." That night, alone in my house, I sat in the quiet and finally let the tears come. Not for the loss, for the release. Because the hardest part of revenge isn't the strike. It's surviving the truth that follows. And the truth was this. I hadn't destroyed my family. I had stopped sacrificing myself to keep a lie alive. The fall was quieter. No more hearings. No more emergency calls. Just adjustments. Daniel and Lily moved into a modest rental near her school. Not the house I'd helped them buy. That was being sold to cover debts Claire had quietly accumulated. Daniel took a job beneath his previous title, humbled but steady. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for help. That mattered. Claire entered treatment. Not the kind she wanted, the kind the court demanded. I heard fragments through Daniel. Mood swings, denial, rage, occasional clarity, followed by collapse. "She still blames you," he said once. I nodded. That's easier than accountability. My relationship with Lily rebuilt itself slowly. Trust doesn't snap back like elastic. It grows, like bone. We started with walks, homework at the kitchen table, quiet afternoons, painting, baking, doing nothing important except being present. One evening, as we washed dishes together, Lily looked up at me. "Grandma," she said, "are you mad at Mommy?" I dried my hands carefully before answering. "I'm disappointed in choices I said, but I don't hate people." She considered that. "I think Mommy is scared all the time," she said. "So am I," sometimes I replied. "But we don't get to hurt people because of it." She nodded, absorbing it the way children absorb truth when it's given without venom. That was my real victory. Not the court orders, not the trust, not the public unraveling, but the quiet correction of a child's understanding of power and love. In October, Daniel asked if we could talk. We sat on the porch, the air crisp, leaves skittering across the steps. "I don't know how to make this right," he said. I looked at him for a long time. "You don't," I replied. "You make it honest." He swallowed. "I thought being a good son meant keeping the peace," he said, "even if it meant lying." I shook my head. Peace built on silence is just delayed damage. He nodded slowly. I won't ask you to forgive me, he said, but I won't betray you again. That's a start, I replied. As the sun dipped low, Lily ran up the steps breathless. Grandma, she said, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you. I smiled. Strength isn't what you think, I said. It's knowing when to stop giving. That night, alone again, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the manipulation, the revenge. People think revenge is about punishment. It isn't. It's about reclaiming authorship of your own life. I didn't burn their world down. I stepped out of the role they assigned me, and when I did, the structure collapsed on its own. There were still 2 chapters left in this story, because karma doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it waits, and when it finally does, it speaks softly, and it listens to those who stayed awake. I thought the story was finished. That was my mistake. Revenge doesn't always end with a verdict or a confession. Sometimes it circles back quieter, wearing the face of consequences you never asked for, but still must face. In early December, Daniel called me late at night. His voice was different, not tired, not ashamed, afraid. She's gone, he said. For how long, I asked. I don't know. Claire had left the treatment facility without notice. No forwarding information, no calls, no messages, just absence. And when someone who has built their entire identity around control disappears, it isn't freedom, it's volatility. The court was notified. A missing persons report was filed. Lily slept in Daniel's bed for a week straight, waking from nightmares she couldn't explain. I stayed steady. That was my role now. Not savior, not shield, anchor. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. Not addressed to Daniel. To me, no return address, no greeting. Just pages. Claire had written it by hand, the pen pressing so hard, the ink tore through the paper. She wrote about betrayal, about humiliation, about how I had taken everything from her. She blamed me for the loss of her marriage, her reputation, her sense of self. Then the tone shifted. She wrote about fear, about waking up without a plan, about realizing she didn't know who she was without someone to dominate. And finally, at the bottom of the last page, one sentence. I wanted to win because I didn't know how to stop. I sat with that letter for a long time, not because it changed anything, but because it explained everything. I gave the letter to Margaret. She made copies, filed it quietly. Then I locked the original away. Some truths are not meant to be revisited. Claire resurfaced in January. She turned herself in to the court, voluntarily, accompanied by a public defender and a therapist. The judge ordered extended treatment, supervised contact only, and long-term evaluation. No drama, no spectacle, just accountability. Daniel asked me how I felt about it. I surprised myself with the answer. Relieved, I said, because the revenge I'd imagined at the beginning of this journey looked nothing like where I stood now. I didn't want Claire destroyed. I wanted her powerless to harm, and that had been achieved. One evening, Lily sat beside me on the couch, her head resting against my arm. Do you think Mommy will get better? She asked. I think she has to want to, I replied. Do you think she wants to now? I thought of the letter. I think she's finally tired, I said. And sometimes that's where change starts. Lily nodded, satisfied. She trusted exhaustion more than promises. So did I. As winter settled in, my house felt different. Not empty, resolved. I had stopped waiting for apologies that would never come in the right form. I had stopped needing recognition for what I endured. I had survived betrayal without becoming bitter. That was my quiet victory. But there was one final act left, not of revenge, of closure. In March, I updated my will. Not because I was afraid, because I was free. The trust remained unchanged. Lily's future protected, insulated from desperation and manipulation. Daniel would receive something modest one day, contingent on nothing but time. Claire's name appeared nowhere. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I also wrote a letter, not to Claire, not to Daniel, to myself. I wrote about the woman I had been when this began. The one who believed endurance was love and silence was peace. The one who thought giving endlessly would guarantee safety. I forgave her. She didn't know better, but I did now. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something else, healthier, smaller, real. Lily spent weekends with me. We planted herbs, painted uneven pottery, watched old movies where women solved problems without apologizing for their strength. Daniel found his footing slowly. Therapy, routine, responsibility. He stopped asking me to rescue him. That mattered more than words. As for Claire, I heard updates occasionally. Progress, setbacks, long stretches of silence. I wished her no harm, but I no longer wished her closeness. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are self-respect. On the anniversary of that Thanksgiving dinner, I cooked for myself. Same table, same chair. Different woman. I raised a glass of wine, alone, and toasted something I never thought I'd earn. Peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on compliance. The kind that comes from knowing you will not abandon yourself again. If you're listening to this, and something in your chest feels tight, let me say this clearly. You are not too old to draw a line. You are not selfish for protecting what you built. You are not cruel for refusing manipulation disguised as love. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclamation. And sometimes the most powerful justice isn't loud. It's living well, fully awake, and finally on your own terms. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived something similar or are standing at the edge of your own awakening, let your voice be heard. Like this story, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that it's never too late to choose yourself. Not quietly, but completely.